As I talked about a little bit, meditation is not really a progressive path. You don't really get a sense that you get better and better at meditation, like you would do if you were studying another subject. You would more have a sense of that you're losing things. And this I say in the most positive way. You will notice at some point that you lost the fear. And you will notice it by the fear not being triggered, and you remember that it usually gets triggered. And also if anxiety goes, you usually don't remember much of that. But you would maybe say, I feel quite okay now. Because the process is, if you don't identify with your thoughts and emotions, things are going to fall off. At first there will be some silence in your mind, and you will feel balanced for a long time. And what is very common then is that then some deep-rooted sankharas, as you might call them, deep-rooted tendencies might come up to the surface. Like old stuff that you push down. Maybe you haven't thought about those things for a long, long time. Maybe memories from kindergarten or early memories come. They just have the space now to be expressed again. And there's nothing different to do with them than you do otherwise in your meditation. Just allow them to come, tell their story, and go. But many people find this when they start with their meditation and it starts to feel good. They think that the meditation is going backwards because these old tendencies are coming up. These old patterns are coming up. Maybe it's something that you thought that you were finished with. I was done with this. And then it still pops its ugly head. But just let those things come. Allow them to come up, express, and they will also go. And what you can notice, after a while at least, is that your mind is much more quiet. It doesn't constantly try to get your attention. There are big gaps. And there are also gaps now. Maybe they're just small. Maybe you focus so much on your thoughts that you miss them, but there are gaps. When you wake in the middle of the night and have to go and pee, and you just stumble in your apartment or your house to get to the bathroom, and you don't really remember who you are when you're peeing, then there is not much thought, because you probably come from deep sleep and there's not much thought there. How is it to stay with your mind? Is it all right? Is it terrible? Sort of half terrible. So rarely do we take the time to do this, to have this much space, to just see what's in your mind. Otherwise, there's just the following of thought, the distractions of so many things in our society. And you might say, why did I come here? This is terrible. My mind is terrible. I'm not a meditator. Or you might doubt that this is for you. This is the weight of your mind. This is what it's been accustomed to. This is normal for the mind, to take this much space, to be so agitated. And if something has been doing that for a long, long time, there's going to be some effort in changing that. It's like if you went down the same path many times with a carriage or a car or something, you create depth. Where the wheels go, there are these I lost the word. Tracks, thank you. Yes, deep tracks. So in the beginning it will seem like it's impossible to stay out of those tracks. The tracks are deep. So that requires some effort. And that's what you're doing today. You're trying to lift this carriage out of its tracks. And the mind likes the tracks. They're nice. They're so easy to go in. Go the same as last time. So if you're really watching your mind and not going with the thoughts all the time, you start to lift your carriage out of these tracks. And then it feels like, but it's just slippery there. I don't know the direction here. I don't know where to go. And then it's so easy to take the easiest way back into the tracks. So if you ever feel confused by your meditation, this is a good thing, because that means that you're out of your tracks. And maybe you should feel unsure. Maybe you start to doubt how all things are connected and who you are in the world and all that. Just let that settle. Allow that to be open. There is no need to define you. The mind likes it, but it creates a very stiff image. You are very fluent. You are very changeful. You don't have to be this or that. What you are changes when your experience changes. And you know this adaptive nature because it's already apparent. If you meet one person, you're in one way, and if you meet another person, you're in another way. And then those two people, if they would meet and talk about you, they would say completely different things. He's very harsh, and he's like always putting me in my place. The one says, it's always so friendly and always trying to encourage. Because it depends on what they bring. And when this fluidity can be there, this allowance of emotions, then also there's a much bigger spectrum of what life can be. But if you have an idea that I should never be forceful, so I don't want to show this side, then you lock your emotions. You say, that's some kind of anger thing, I think, so I'm going to push that away.
I just want to see if I understand it correct, that you mean if you stay fluent and not rigid, that your mind and emotions will change more into anger or happiness or
They will change much more into what is needed.
Yeah.
And what is needed to be expressed.
Talking about the being, because the being stays the same.
Yes, the being stays the same. I have to talk about the level on the relative level also of the body-mind, because if I would only talk about beingness here, I think it would be too much for you. But this fluidity has to do with the beingness. It comes from that. And as soon as the mind gets involved, it gets more rigid. So the flow of emotion has everything to do with the naturalness of beingness. So in that sense, it comes from beingness. Because the emotions are needed. When they are on your fingertips, and they can be allowed, and you can allow to switch between them when they are needed. That is a very harmonious state. When some of those fingertips are locked, because you say, I don't want to feel this emotion, then you create problems for yourself. Because maybe you have to tell someone to draw a line, or to really tell them off because they're hurting others or you or themselves. Then it's needed. And this is also something that many people who practice meditation think, that you always have to be this smiling, very soft and gentle, That's also just an idea. That's an attitude. Of course you should be caring to other people, but caring sometimes means to tell them to stop. And if it comes from love, most people will also notice that. They might not like it in the moment. After some time they come back and they say, thank you for saying this. It's very brave of you, or something like this. So don't compartmentalize this. Don't put your emotions in a box. And to allow your emotions is not always to express all of them. You understand the difference here? Because expressing them outwardly can just be your projections. That's what most people do. When they feel something, they project it on someone. Let's say I feel disappointed and I point at you and I say, I'm so disappointed with you. How could you do this to me? That is the kind of... But if there is disappointment in me, it's better to look. And you can still allow it, even though it's internal. And when it comes, and maybe there will be some feelings of forgiveness or something like this. And then there will come some crying, perhaps. And you can allow the emotion completely. But it was never projected outwards. So that is allowing things internally. And sometimes if you feel too bottled up, then you can scream into a pillow or a friend of mine goes down to the train tracks, where they just go into Central Station in Malmö, and he just, when the train passes, he just screams, "Ah!" And then he gets in his car and goes home again. So sometimes it's needed for some expression, but you don't have to put it. It's not putting it on his girlfriend or. Because there is a trap that you can go into with meditation that I've seen many times, that you always try to catch the highest teaching because you find the highest teaching to be the best somehow, and then you suppress yourself in that. You don't allow your emotions because the highest teaching says you should not be touched by anything, or if you interpret it like that. And I see this trap sometimes, that people come in, so they don't express anymore because they think that their emotions somehow are wrong. But allow everything. And meditation, as I said, is hard to define as something progressive, because what you are is always there. So it's also hard for it to say that I'm getting better or something like this. But there are some things that you can recognize, and especially if the mind starts to get silent. And this is one of the best indicators that you can notice that you're doing things more harmonious in your life and more natural, is that the mind is not bothering you so much. So notice the mind, and even though it's agitated sometimes, if it's more going towards this silence, and you can also enjoy the silence. It's not this you don't feel restless in the silence. In the beginning you can feel a bit restless in the silence because you're taking this carriage out of the tracks and you don't know where it's going. But when you're used to that, the carriage can move freely, then you can enjoy the silence. And the silence is very, very enjoyable, because you're very truthful when you're with your silence. It doesn't want anything. You don't have to fix anything in it. You can just rest in it. And after a while, these things that I say to you now will seem ridiculous, because you will say, but why would I like to go anywhere else? The silence is the nicest thing there is. I don't want to go with my mind somewhere. I want to stay. Enjoy the silence, if it comes to you. And that is really how it feels, that it just comes to you. It's not really a doing. In the beginning you can try to get more of the silence, but this is not possible. You can push thoughts away for a while, and then they will very forcefully come back. You can try that if you want to. But you cannot create silence like that. But if you're more natural with your experience, in other words, if you don't react and identify with the content of your experience that much, it will become more silent. let me hear from you. Let me know what's going on.
Today I've experienced some frustration because when I sit and meditate, and or if we sit in Satsang, or if I meditate at home, it's not a big problem. My mind is nice to me. I can enjoy my meditation, and there are lots of gaps and silence. But today when I was walking, my mind is like, when I do like everyday stuff, I notice that my mind is coming with just nonsense all the time. It's not even long stories, it's just like one sentence here, one there, and jumping like, and it's just tiring. And I guess I wasn't so aware of that. I guess I'm usually like that in my everyday life when I don't sit and meditate.
Yeah. So move your practice also into that area.
It's just hard to remember sometimes, to catch yourself, like to be aware when there's so much other things going on.
Yes.
Should have an alarm clock or something.
Yes, some people do that. Actually, they have once an hour, a little dit. It says just, oh. But you can also just do it as a habit, to check in. Because especially to stop these long stories, or that is coming again and again and again and again, it just continues, it builds up somehow. If you notice it, it will stop, or it will change at least. Because it's so easy to make these pockets where meditation is not there, because you consider them to be, there's too much going on at work, or there's too much going on in this situation. It has nothing to do with meditation, you would say. And you create a pocket where you say, now all these egoic thoughts are allowed somehow. And then it's full out war in those pockets, and otherwise it can be quite gappy and spacious.
Yeah, sometimes our mind tells me in those moments, if I want to stop and check in, it's like, no, you don't have time for that now.
But there's just 1 second it takes to stop and check in. Just notice mind, body. Yeah, good. But it puts criteria on it. It says this doesn't fill the criteria for how a situation should be, that should be meditative. It's not good enough, right? So then we say this is not that. But check in also then. Watch those, see what happens. Otherwise there will be small pockets where the ego can just go bananas, and all other times it can. And it will be, especially if you already experience big gaps when you sit in your meditation, it's so easy to move into these areas because you know what it is to watch. And it will just be uncomfortable in the beginning, and it will just play you a little bit in the beginning, but it cannot stay, as you know. It doesn't have that power, because you have to play with it. You have to say that you are something that is suffering this play. So and this step is very important. Moving it from just practicing your meditation when everything is fine, to practicing meditation, whatever happens.
You said that everything contains within consciousness. Like my perception, my ego is within the consciousness, but it feels like consciousness is inside me. Do you understand?
No, I don't understand. How is your consciousness inside you?
No, it feels like my consciousness is inside my body. Like I perceive, like it's inside me. I don't know.
But when you say that, and so you mean that for you, you experience your consciousness as an object that you can perceive?
No, yeah, kind of like a flashlight. I don't know. It's like
Okay. And I would prefer in this instant that we use the word awareness instead of consciousness.
Yeah, okay, awareness.
Yes. Because awareness is what knows that you can perceive that consciousness as a flash inside of you. So that cannot be it. Because since you can report it to me as a flash, or that's what you said, right? Yeah. That means that there is something in you that can perceive this flash. Otherwise you could not make this report, right? Yeah. So there is something prior to that. So what you think is consciousness or awareness, that is not it.
Okay. So yeah, okay.
Because it's not a thing.
No.
It's not something that is an experience that can come and go. It's not a flash. It's not something like that.
No.
Because there is something that is prior to that.
Yeah. Like sees what I perceive, or
Yes, that knows everything.
yeah.
You can call it the knower. It knows everything that happens. But you're just sometimes unconscious and you go with your thoughts and your mind. And be very careful with these kind of ideas, and that you put something, I know what consciousness is, it's this. That is never going to happen with the mind. The mind will never catch it like that. So be very careful with those labels. Try to make it as open as possible. I know that can be scary. I know it's not very comfortable to do that, to leave it open. It's much more safe to feel like I have the grasp on this. I know what awareness is. I know what consciousness is. Like you have it in a box. But it's not something that can be contained like that. So when you start to say instead, I don't know what awareness is. It's there, but I don't know what it is. That's how I can tell that you would know something about it. I have no idea what it is. It's just there always. You understand?
Yeah, I understand.
But the best thing is not to go about all this intellectual path with it. Just look. It is here now. It's not that I will find my awareness later. That is ridiculous. It's always here. So you don't have to look in your mind for awareness and the definition of awareness when it's already here. Why not be awareness? Why not stay as awareness? And see what happens. Find out who you are when you're not a person. And it doesn't mean that you get some kind of intellectual answer. You just have the experience of what that is. If it would be an intellectual game, then for some people it would be much easier because they would have a better intellectual capacity. But it's not like that.
Jag tror också jag känner mig frustrerad, fast på ett annat sätt. Det var inte så länge sedan som jag inte var medveten om att jag kunde dyka in i de här tankebanorna. Liksom att tankevärlden inte ens fanns. Liksom. Och mina glapp är så små. Så jag blir bara så frustrerad i det, tror jag. Att nu är det bara så, allting bara så himla överväldigande, jämt, konstant. Och jag lider kanske lika mycket som jag gjorde innan, som jag gör nu av mina tankar på något sätt, samtidigt som det är också den här biten. Jag vet, det är ingen fråga egentligen, det är bara så.
But this is a very common experience, what you describe, that you start to get aware of the content of your mind, and you have a feeling that it's worse now than it was before. And that is because there is awareness of it. So it can seem worse, but actually you're just aware what is going on, how it's been all along. And this, waking up to that, can be quite brutal. It's not always very nice. It feels tough. It feels like, this is not nice. This is not what I wanted. But even though the seeing what is there is challenging, it's still so much better than not seeing it. And maybe you won't see it now, but after a while, you will see that I am so happy that I started to be conscious about my mind, because from that point it's possible for change to happen, to start to not identify with it anymore. And that freedom opens, and that its gaps becomes longer. It's not possible if you're completely unconscious of it and just follow the mind, whatever it feels good can feel okay for a while, but if something happens, if something drastically happens in your life, you have no idea what's going on, and you will just be drawn into that. It's very common with people who feel they can feel quite balanced, but very unconscious, and then they get divorced or something, and they start to drink, and everything just gets this snowball effect, because they have no relationship with their mind, so they just react to everything. And this kind of mind is, of course, very dangerous for the person. So it's always better to know. At least from my point of view, I always want to know. And if you're curious, you can just look deeper and deeper.
I have something that I'm struggling with. And I have this idea that we live here in life, and we have come here and we have been born just to experience things. And I do believe that we have something that's inside of us, like a soul, and when we die we connect again, and then when we get connected we know everything, but we can't feel anything and we can't think anything because we are one again. And
So my purpose in life is to experience, to live, to feel a lot, to feel love and joy and happiness, but also to feel all the other things, all the fear, the frustration, the failure, to go through all of this and to feel and to think about it and to be it. And when you're talking about these other things, when it's going to be all quiet and it just feels like a waste, like I'm missing something.
Yes, but this is what the mind says. This is the mind's interpretation, because the mind would hate something that sounds like nothing. For the mind, meditation doesn't sound very appealing. No, it doesn't, because I talk a lot about stillness and nothingness, and who are you when you're not a person, and things like this. To the mind, this is like, that is nothing, that is death, the mind says. That is not life. But that is because that is just an idea of it. This stillness makes everything come alive. Because when you're distracted by your mind and you're in the future and the past, you don't see the present moment as it is. You don't see the beauty of it. You're somewhere else. So,
but it's a strange thing, because I can do that. I can see the beauty. I can see all of those things, and there has been things that happened in my life that was very. My son was in an accident when he almost died, and still I could take it with gracefulness and with appreciations, and I could really live through it, because the things that happens to me, I have to deal with them and I have to accept them and move on, and I can't really change them. That I'm all fine with, but it's just this everyday numbness. Do you get where I'm? Because I'm feeling like if you don't, if it's quiet, you're numb.
it's not true. That is not true. When the mind is quiet, then you are alive. It is the opposite of what you say, actually. You don't become dead inside because the mind doesn't play all its things at once. You get alive inside. You feel connected and you feel love. This is not some kind of, you don't get to be a vegetable. I know that this is a very common perception of meditation, that you become some kind of vegetable. Do I seem completely cut off to you?
No.
Do I seem numb?
No.
So it's not like that. Life comes from beingness, and the mind makes things rigid by its projection and its ideas. Notice the moments where you feel really alive, if the mind is super active or if it's quiet. And you will notice. So that's why it's so important to notice your experience, because you will notice, because the mind's ideas is so easily taken over, to take as more important than what is actually happening. We're not looking so much at what is actually happening. We're looking at our ideas of things. And many of them we have gotten from, we draw some conclusions ourselves, or we got them from our parents or our environment in some way, and we just took them as truths. Truth. This is what I am. This is what my purpose is. Blah, blah, blah. But that's why I'm saying that we're here to explore. We're here to look at what is happening, not the ideas. What is happening with the mind if you don't follow everything that it says? will you get numb? Or will you get more sensitive and more alive? Find out. Don't take one. And even if I am telling you and you will say, okay, I believe you. It's like this now. That doesn't do anything. It's just another idea that is believed in. Maybe has more to do with what is true, but it's still just an idea. So even if you have very nice ideas and they correlate with the truth a lot, if they're still just an idea, then it will still feel empty.
It's just hard to stay in the silence, because when you feel the silence and it's good, you start to think about it.
How can I keep it? It depends on your definition of stress here, but usually stress is a build-up of belief in thoughts. Is when the pressure feels like it's overwhelming, it's too much. You believe in thoughts, and you believe in thoughts, and you believe in thoughts, and you have a sense that you're behind. You don't have time to really do all the things that you. This is what we usually define. We can define it here.
Yeah, because like if I'm, for example, walking and my thoughts are like playing with me, I think I can. I mean, I know most of the time how to let go of them. But for example, in the morning when the kids are screaming and we're gonna make some breakfast and I feel stress, I can do the same thing.
But it will not be in the same way. But you can check in and you can notice. Because there's also all the stress that you are suffering in those mornings. They have a build-up to them. And they have belief connected to them. And in your mind, probably this belief is very rational. But we really have to hurry up now because the consequences will be blah, blah, blah. And you identify with all this. They can also be just allowing the happening of whatever happens. And you can hurry, you can. They can be hurrying up because you have time to meet. But the problem is always the suffering. The problem is
What would happen?
it probably won't give you more time, but you will be much more balanced in it.
Yeah, because that's the difference.
Yes. I can tell you a story about stress. Sometimes I work as a designer, and this spring I was working at we're getting guests. Should we tell them something? They're leaving. No? Usually.
For meditation.
Okay. I was at work, and we had a project that had a very short deadline, and everyone in the team, you could really see that it pressured them. They were sitting in front of the computers and doing this long. You know this kind of environment at work? And then Antonia, who I was working closest with, she was looking at me and she said, "Markus, why aren't you stressed?" and I told her that it's not going to help. I don't see how the stressfulness is going to help me here. We have a lot to do. I much rather be clear-headed, and I was joking with her. And she started to laugh instead. Because you also break the sincerity of it if you don't take it so seriously. The problem is that everything is so serious. Your mind is so serious all the time. That stress in the morning and that you won't make it in time, that is so important that you really have to suffer it. But you don't have to do that. And that's why I also talk about these things like, in your meditation, everything can happen. You can be super busy in your life, but you can still stay as beingness.
But then you have to take the consequences. You have to come late to daycare.
No, probably not. Because when you're totally stressed out, you do the wrong choices and you forget your keys and you have to run back and forward. If you're calm, you will have much easier time to prioritize the right things. In this work situation I was in, when they noticed that I was calm and they were stressed, they came to me to ask, "What are we doing next?" Because I was the only person in the team who were balanced. So life is much easier then. It's like also saying, it's like what we talked about yesterday with the fear also. That you have the idea that somehow fear is going to help you to get away from the snake. No, you're going to do clumsy things and probably be bit by the snake if you're really fearful. But if you're calm, you can just remove it. Those things are never helpful. This is also, the mind just creates those kind of ideas. That identification is so common, and so many people do it, so we say this is the normal way of handling it.
And it's also very hard to live in a world where people act like that. It's hard to stay balanced. Like the workplace I'm right now, they're like running in the hallway like every day, and they're very rushed all the time because this is the atmosphere. And as I said before, here is very easy for me to calm down. Here is very easy for me to connect with myself. But in a situation where everybody's expecting so much of you, and they're actually running to the computer to continue working, it's so easy to take on their energy, to take on, and that's a very, very hard thing to let that go.
Yes, but the more established it becomes in you, the more clear it will be, even though everyone else would say that you're wrong in your assessment of how to take on the world. Everyone just stands up and shouts, "No!" And you will, if you really see it, you will just say, "Yes." So, on the surface, and if you're attracted to the surface, then you will be caught in it. But in the depth of your being, and if you look there, nothing can touch that. It cannot be hurt or destroyed or stressed or rushed. But it can experience everything in that. And I'm sure you've met people also who are very level-headed in your work. And maybe they're the boss at some department because they can stay calm even though a lot of things are happening.
Well, actually, most of them are running.
Most of
Yes.
Sometimes when I meet people close to me, friends and family, and they talk a lot about
what's going on in their life, stress and things.
Mm.
And I think it's not real what you're talking about. It's sometimes I think I can see it's just on the surface. It doesn't even have to be like that. But they perceive it like that.
Yes.
And I can feel very lonely.
Yes.
Yes. Because they are close to me.
Yes.
Mm.
And this is one of the things. If you start or if you stop to get involved in this kind of things, if you start to lose your interest in it, then you're going to feel lonely, and you're going to feel like you're leaving the other ones behind. I know this feeling very well. But it doesn't make you really to disconnect with them. It's just a feeling that comes because it doesn't feel like you see things from the same perspective anymore. And this is a very common thing on a spiritual path or when you practice meditation, that you're going to feel at some point that you're leaving the world behind. And that you also have to come to terms with that. Because maybe you had an idea prior to this that you would find people, or that your family would understand the exact same things that you understand, and that you would have this great connection with them. But that is not for sure at all. And the more you can accept that this is, in that sense, it's a lonely path. And that is just one part of accepting it. And for a couple of years I had a lot of problems with this feeling, and I just wanted to find different spiritual groups to be with, to feel more at home, sort of. But when I finally started to accept that this is the path that I am going is not where everyone else is going, and that there would be some disconnect with that. People will still like you, but you won't feel like you have the same, you're not viewing the world from the same point. And this is also fine. But because it also rids you of the idea that you will find a partner or a friend or someone that would be like, make things more complete. You understand that it doesn't work like that. You are already complete. And the loneliness will go. The deeper you go, the more you understand that there is no such thing as loneliness, actually. There is only connection. And you will see that connection with people, even if they're somewhere else.
Why is it easier to see that in some people?
Do you mean this connectedness or beingness?
I mean, it depends on me, kind of.
Yes.
But is it always like a reflection? Because sometimes
Sorry, you have to speak louder.
but in some people you meet, you can feel that connection directly, even if you don't know the person.
Mm.
But in some persons, you can't feel it at all. Why is that different? Because it's a reflection of
Yes.
your being. So it
Yes.
I mean,
And it seems like, especially if you have things that you project, that you, for example, certain aspects of yourself that you don't like, if someone has those qualities, then you would really dislike them if you just project on them. But if you feel free, then you look at them and you will just see compassion for it. You won't get afraid of their anger or feeling of guilt or whatever they're carrying that you don't like. But there is also just that you're easier to get along with some people than others. That's just also a natural, yes. Did I answer your question?
I have a question,
Yes.
maybe connected to what you were talking about now. I have some people that are close to me who has become very, very bitter. And I don't know how to deal with it. So it's like it's very, very sticky, and I can if I talk to somebody, a bitter person, and then I can be very depressed for a day or 24 hours or something, and I don't know how to shower it off.
Yes.
So, is that the same answer for this?
Yes, because you always, sorry. There has to be something in their way of perceiving things that you connect with. Maybe just because you want to connect with them, you want them to be your friends or family, or you want to have some connection with them. So you agree to this this meeting of minds, and then you identify with those thoughts, and then no. And when I say identify with thoughts, I can mean in an unconscious way.
Okay.
It's not like you're choosing consciously when I say identify. Most identification happens just unconsciously, and you get drawn into this talk. So it has more to do with how you react to your own part in this, to your own emotions and your own thoughts in this. So if you relate to them and can let them come and go, these things won't be so sticky. Maybe they will just stick with you for half a day until it's, you understand?
Too much.
Yeah, it's still too much. I understand, but it's very common that these kind of stickinesses, they decrease if you start to not react to your mind like that, because the thing that can make it continue in you for a day, that means that there is some kind of unconscious identification happening with it, and then it sticks, and then it takes some time for it to, you buy some thought and it continues, or you buy into the emotion somehow.
Because my wish is that it goes in here and out there directly.
Yes.
But then I don't know how to meet the person.
Yes, and
Sticky bitter person.
yeah, but and
also in the moment when.
yes, and it's going to still be uncomfortable to be with people who are like that. But if you don't, but the only thing that you can have any possibility to change in this is your part. So if you stop reacting to your part of it, then you won't suffer that. It will still be difficult in the meeting with them because they will have this very sticky energy, and maybe you will feel like, okay, we can stop this conversation now, I can do something else. Yeah, but it won't come with you. You won't bring it with you.
So you think it's better to avoid those kind of relationships, or it's better to stay with them and work with yourself?
And it depends on your situation, of course. Maybe you cannot avoid them. Maybe your colleagues at work and this is the work that you've got, and maybe it's very difficult to get another job. So then you do the best with what you have. But
or difficult to get another sister.
that can also be very difficult. So then you just take it, do the best of it, and also if you look at yourself and you start to be clearer with yourself and more conscious about what is going on, then it will be much easier to deal with. Maybe even the reactions of your sister to you will be different. She will start asking you different things. Nothing is for sure, but as I told you with this woman who came to meditation and said her family had changed. The people, because if you're not, because you probably start to get afraid of talking to her because you know this stickiness is going to be there. So you will emit fear probably in this conversation. It can be very subtle and you can be very unconscious, but you know what the consequences of it are, so you're afraid. So if those consequences stop, then you also stop being afraid, and then you will meet it differently. And what that will, it will just be nicer for you. That I can promise you. And the same for what you talked about with your colleagues that are running down the hallway.
That actually happened to me. My sister, well, my closest person, she and I had a relation. We had a good relationship. We were in some patterns. We always fell in the same patterns of fighting. But now we don't. We don't. And she actually said to me that you don't bite anymore. Whenever I give this and that to you, you don't bite. You just let it go. You're more harmonious. So relationships can change even if you never imagined they would.
Yes, you could say that you could have the feeling that this person is impossible to reach, for example. And if you change, that person suddenly... I can just say from personal experience that, for example, the question sometimes that my father asks me, yes, because I never thought that he would do something like that, or what he thinks of what I am doing. And then I hear it from other people that he's so proud of me or something like that. And I also thought that he always thought that I was just a very strange boy. So people, exactly, if they don't have something to bite, if you don't bite back, then it cannot continue in the same way. It's going to be different. And the beautiful thing in this is that the possibility to not to react to your mind and your emotions in this unconscious way, that can change. So there's a lot of hope. You go.
That's me again.
Yes.
I've been thinking a lot about this, and there is this with the immigrants and the hatred and kilograms and everything, and I have this idea that if I don't let it affect me, if I just push it away, I'm not part of it. But sometimes I can feel like in the Second World War, if there was a lot of people that didn't do anything. There was a lot of people that didn't react, that just said, yeah, whatever, it doesn't concern me. I don't want to say whatever, it doesn't concern me, but still, don't we have responsibility to... I don't have my sister, I have my mother. She's very, very, very racist. And when she says something to me and you say, don't bite, well, I'm actually hurting myself by not standing up for what I think is right.
Yes, but these are not things to be confused. Sometimes, if someone is very violent, as I said before, you have to also, and maybe she has these kind of views in front of your children, they hear this kind of talk, and you have to say, I don't want to hear this kind of talk in front of the children, because they will pick this up and say things like that in school, or that can have terrible consequences. So don't be afraid to put your foot down if people are violent. It's not like that.
But then I trigger her and
Yeah.
fight. No.
Yeah. So, but that has to do also where your putting down the foot comes from. Because if it comes from fear, if it comes from that kind of tension, then it will escalate. You will notice this. And if you find a peaceful place in you where it can come from, so it can come from love, then you will notice that it will stop right in the tracks. Because you won't be triggered any further. But you
And
can
that's
still...
actually where we are now. I say, stop, let's not talk about that, and then we don't.
Yeah.
But still I have to, yeah, I just wanted to say that some place we need to also say, no, this is not okay.
Yes. That is fine. But see to it that that comes from a place of love. And the only way to find that is to look, to observe, and not to react to thoughts and emotions, and to just allow it. And to be spacious, because then there is space for all of this. Then the drama can happen on the surface, like the waves on the surface. It can happen a little bit. Someone is angry, you tell them this has to stop now. But if it comes from a calm place, it will very quickly calm down. But if it's agitated, it will escalate. You will notice. And it's not possible for you to say something to change your mother. You probably already know that.
Try that. Fail that.
Yes. So look at yourself and see if you can find peace in this. And if you find peace with yourself, you will be in peace with your mother, even though she has this view. And you will tell her when she needs to stop, perhaps, but it can be peaceful. Yes.
What about forgiveness? Is it important?
Yes. Especially towards yourself. It is important from the view of the egoic mind, because you still have to handle it somehow. That's why I said before that some people try to jump over being identified with their ego. But that's not how most of the mind works usually. So then things like forgiveness comes. Because that is a way of accepting whatever is. So it's very forgiveness is very simple, actually. It's just allowing you to be as you are. Was it something else you thought about with forgiveness? No? You will notice that all the things that are positive with meditation and that feel some kind of meditative, like gratitude or forgiveness, they will all lead to the same source. They will make everything quiet and still, balanced. Because gratitude is also just, you don't want anything in gratitude. You're just grateful. It's very, very simple. You don't want more in gratitude.
Sometimes I think it can be confusing because I can get these experiences of like pure bliss or whatever you should call it, like feels very ecstatic and like overflowing love or gratitude, like you say. But then I also notice that it comes and goes. So I feel it cannot be like the stillness, but still it's still, and it feels very similar to the stillness, but it cannot stay like this all the time.
No, everything will change.
Yeah.
And also these blissful feelings, they can be very, very subtle. They can go into a very subtle bliss. It can just feel very peaceful, but not much is happening. It's not very excited but many people associate these kind of feelings with some excitement, perhaps. And this kind of excitement is not going to stay.
Yeah.
It's just another feeling.
I have like both those experiences, but it's changing.
Yes. And whatever is changing, that is not it. Yes.
So it's not business or
No, but it can be the fragrance of isness, because it has the feeling of gratitude and contentment and bliss. Those things come from it.
Sorry?
Those things come from beingness.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the fragrance of it.
But so is it just something I should observe like everything else?
Yes.
And let it come and go?
Absolutely. And because it's also so easy for the egoic mind to get attached to these kind of things. Oh, that was lovely. 2 days of bliss. More, please. That's how the mind works. So just look. If it comes and goes, that's not it.
What does it mean? Why do we get experiences like that? Because they seem very pure and free of ego in some way. But maybe there's some ego sneaking in probably.
But the whole idea of the one experiencing this and the one that is gonna get this experience back or elongate it, all this is ego. That is that is the play. All the wanting of it, keeping of it. Who wants? Who keeps? because
I'm just thinking what it means, like I don't know.
but it's not like that. It doesn't have a.
An
It
expectation, like
no. But there can be a great sense of meaningfulness in it,
yeah.
right?
Yes.
You experience it, and everything feels like the purpose is right here. It's just to be.
Mm.
It's so purposeful and peaceful.
Mm.
And then the mind comes. And it does something with it. It wants to keep it. Or
Mm.
this is the most difficult part of it. The most seductive things is when there is just beauty and beauty and beauty. And you want to keep and keep and keep. I don't want to lose this beauty. I have to stay on the path. I have to do this and this. Who has to? So this is more and more important question than what is actually what is going on in the world, or planning your spiritual journey. I have to go to more retreats, or I have to do this and that. Just ask the question. Who is going to be fulfilled? Who is going to stay in that bliss forever? Is there such a person?
I was just wondering that.
Very good.
I was thinking about this with forgiveness and holding on to resentment. Like, is there that point in, like, I have some resentments that I'm holding on to with my parents.
What is resentment?
Bitter. Is there a point to talk to them about it?
Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes when people try that, they get very disappointed.
Yeah, that's not fair. That they won't understand.
No, they won't understand at all where you're coming from and why you're saying these terrible things about them. So I think for the most part, if we would just pretend that they were not alive anymore, and you would still have this resentment, what would you do? So look at because it is in you. This is the important part of it. And if you feel like there is some action that you have to take to talk to them, it just comes back and back, and then try it. But there is no guarantee for any solution there. The solution would still be here.
Yeah, or actually I talked to my father several years ago and it didn't really, I got disappointed, so.
Because the world is happening in you.
Yeah.
Whatever you say that your parents are is an aspect of you. I know that can be difficult to swallow, especially if you have a resentment towards them. But see if you can look at it. If you can find the love and the forgiveness. And also look at what is keeping this resentment up. There's some part in you, there's some pride or something that says, I have to stand up for myself, or I'm not going to be like my parents, or something like this. There is some part that you want to keep in it. Some pride, probably. Is that right?
I don't know.
Look.
Yeah.
Because this, that will be the underlying thing that keeps this story going. Because you think that you have to uphold something. Uphold a standard or whatever it is. Look and you will see.
You mean uphold the standard?
Yes, like moral standard. I don't know what happened between you and your parents, so I'm just... Whatever you feel like you have to uphold in this, there is probably something. And see if you can let go of that also. So just look. It's so common we go with such a heavy mental backpack. It's terrible.
Yes.
Always there.
Yeah.
Always weighing us down. Always being heavy. There is no need. You can take it off. But the mind says it's good to have a backpack. Where else would you store things? And the great thing without the backpack is that there is nowhere to store things. It's like thieves in an empty house. They can look all they want. There's nothing to steal.
You say look at it, see what's in there. But when do I look at it? If I don't want to analyze it, and maybe it doesn't come up naturally.
Then
So when do I look?
just look and it will come. If it bothers you so much that you can speak it like you just did, then it's quite much on the surface. So it's going to come quite quickly. Maybe it will hide for a while because the mind feels that you're onto it. But it will come. And if it doesn't come, then it's gone. If it never comes, then it's gone, and then there's no problem.
And how do I do the looking if I don't analyze?
You just look. You just see what is there. You don't put words on it. You don't look from a perspective of words. That's why I call it the silence. You're just aware of it. You see the thoughts. You see how they move. You see how they play, how they come, how they go. You see that they come from this silence and they go back into the silence. And you don't have to do anything with the thoughts. Just allow them to play their little story or their little thing, and then they go. You don't have to connect with them. You don't have to fix them, control them. You don't have to be aware, oh, now it's this specific thought, now I know what to do. It's nothing like that. Just look. it will lose its power. It can come, if it's a really old and deep pattern, it will probably come many, many times. But you will feel it after a while that it loses its momentum. Because if you never react to it, then it means that it has no power. It gets its power from that you either like it or dislike it. Those are the ways that thoughts can get power. You have to resist them or want them. If you don't do any of those things, then the thought becomes nonsense. Then it doesn't matter if it says something about your childhood or if it's a sentence about pink elephants. There will be no difference in the purpose of them. They will just be nonsense. But please, don't believe me. Try it. Please look and try and see what happens.
Can you go over the process? I'm just afraid that, well, I'm not afraid. I'm worried that when I go home, I will not be able to remember the process.
Which process?
The process of observing.
You're making it sound really complicated.
Okay.
But I'm going to try to explain this as clearly as I can. Just look. There is nothing, and blah, blah, blah. There's nothing like that attached to it. It's just look.
Okay.
And I know that you can associate that with analyzing. But I think that we went over this a lot of times now. It has to stick with you somehow. That we're not talking about, the looking is not analyzing. Is that clear enough?
Yes. Just look.
Yes. Don't have to make it complicated. And if you in the beginning don't understand what just look means, try and look until you understand what looking entails, what it means. In the beginning it can feel fussy, like you associate your mind with this looking, and then you notice that, oh, but I should be looking, now I'm analyzing again, and the mind tells me these instructions on how I should meditate. I have to look at that. And then you just all the time go as far back as you can to always perceive. Perceive, perceive, perceive. And if you get if the mind takes you on a ride, then you come back to look at it again. Get out and you look at it again.
I just want to say, is it just to listen, like you're calm and you listen inside, or can I?
Yes. Yes, you can call it listening because it's not. It doesn't really have any.
No mind.
Yes. Because it doesn't really have to do with this looking doesn't really have to do with your eyes. So you can also say, you could say listen.
My life has been quite chaotic before, and now it's been quite calm, and things are getting very easy. But now I like this, there must have be more in me, like more suffering to come up. I look for it and I want to, like it's, I think that I might be hiding somewhere.
Ah. Yes. The
And
egoic
then
mind.
I want it to come up so I can let
Yes.
it go.
The mind doesn't like that attitude at all. The mind can really hide in this kind of attitude. If you are a lot of the time, okay, mind, bring it. The mind hates that because it's like it likes to fight in the shadows. It doesn't like the light because it's a shadow fighter. So it wants to be in the unconscious and these kind of parts where you're not aware of it. That's where the ego likes to go. When you say full on, come and get me, the mind doesn't like that. Then it will start to hide. But it will still be there, very subtle, and it won't say much. But you will see tendencies of it. There will be attitudes that will still say that it's there. So you have to look at these more subtle parts in it. And it will be easy if your mind gets very still, which it probably does from what you tell me, then it's very quiet, and you will be able to sense these very subtle things. If the mind is still looking for something, or longing for something to happen, or small tendencies can be there. Or just also this that you talk about, that you want the mind to show itself.
Maybe not the mind, but like some suffering hiding inside, and
Yes.
the feelings maybe.
Yes, but look at who wants that to happen.
I want to be like purified.
Yes. But this is what you are looking for. Drop that. You can drop that whole thing. Just look and see what happens. You don't have to look for anything specifically. Then you will be in there trying to find. You don't have to try to find, just be. Okay? Hmm? We had until 5, right?
Yes.
Then our time is up. But we have one more satsang. It's a really good day for satsangs. We have one more at 7:30, I think. Yes, good. And we have dinner in between. So enjoy. And I'll see you in a while.